I was
Uh,
I'm realizing that the days in retirement can be slow.
yeah.
Some days maybe slower than others. Um, but the other thing that I like, I guess because I signed up for these classes, I signed up for three grad classes with AMU, um, a research theory and design, another one starting Monday on criminal intelligence analysis, and then another one in March on intel analysis. Um, but already I'm preparing an assignment that's due this weekend on my research proposal, as if I was going to go through with it, but not really go through with it.
Mm.
Uh, just sort of get the gist of the idea of writing, and then the literature review is due on Sunday. So I've been putting bits and pieces together. I've been going through a stack of books, including yours.
Hey, my precision
I've
and
already
safeguard.
just on this one alone. I'm going to borrow where it fits appropriately. I'm going to borrow a few quotes directly attributed to AI, or the references that you make in the book on AI. And then when the coast is clear, at some point, I'll go back and read the rest of the story.
That's
Uh, that,
awesome.
that was Paul Harvey. You remember Paul Harvey?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, that was quite an eloquent speaker, presenter,
Yeah.
and he always made you cling to hang on to see where
Yeah.
this, whatever he was covering, where it was going, and it was fascinating. And I miss that sort of on the air dialogue thing. And
Yeah. Yeah.
how's your week been?
Well, it has been wonderful. Um, lots of new things. We oh gosh. So yeah, I'm gearing up for the IAFE North Georgia University um, presentation. I
I'm so
have
jealous.
Yeah, I am going to submit a proposal to the IAFE Europe uh, conference. So hopefully I'll get kind of um, chosen for that. So, gear up for travel. What is that in December of this year to London? Hopefully they'll clean London up
Wasn't
quite a
it?
bit.
Wasn't it in September?
Or is it September? Yeah, one,
I think so.
either one. Um,
Yeah, yeah.
um, but gearing up for the Carolinas Criminal uh, Intel Analyst Conference
Oh
in
wow.
North Carolina, coming up in, I think theirs is in June. I've got the National Student Affairs, um, their national conference coming up in March. Um, so this is this week, because it's the end of the first month of the year, is like really gearing up for what I've got coming up in the rest of the year. Um, you almost feel like, okay, did you bite off more than you can chew? Because I also have ACJS conference, and I can't remember what month that is.
Wow.
Um, coming up, that a majority of all these I've already have accepted proposals, and of course gearing up presentations. So IAFE, the CCAA in Carolinas, um, yeah, and then I'll do the other IAFE as well. I'll put in for, of course, um, the Foundation for Critical Thinking actually just put out a call for proposals for their 46th annual international conference, and I look forward to really putting together a presentation for that as well. But they've also opened up their certification. Um, you know, I I don't look at myself as like the expert or anything like that on critical thinking. I don't think I've cornered that market, and I there will never be humbled enough by, by what I learn every day. I'm like, wow. I just my office is a mess with books. I mean, I've been getting really into, and my Substack took off over the last month. I think I started out with 97 people or 87 people at the beginning of subscribers at the beginning of December, and it blew up to like 120. So I was like,
Wow.
wow. And yeah, LinkedIn, I kind of post what I've been writing and such. So yeah, overnight I gained two more, which is awesome. But that also means like, okay, I obviously I have to keep pushing that edge of what it is, that we talk about here on Fridays and Mondays, and great ideas. And so, um, but I had an interesting conversation the other day, Wednesday, um, with a former colleague about kind of what we've been saying about the Intel, and they're like, well, you're actually now becoming. They gave their honest opinion, which I totally want people's honest opinions of intelligence analysts. That well, you're blanketing everybody, and you're really kind of almost being offensive and insulting, saying that Intel analysts don't, they don't know how to think. And this is somebody who spent, I want to say, quite a number of years as a naval intelligence officer, as well as within some of the three-letter agencies. Um, and I said, well, I I guess I do. I said, I want to insult, because I could even say myself, why do you think I'm writing this stuff? I'm learning it, and I wish I would have learned it 30 years ago. Um,
The conversations that nobody wants to have, and they need to have it.
yeah, yeah. Like the common person tries to say they're smart. Um, and I'm like, no, you're dumb. I include you, meaning me, in that conversation. When I say you, I'm not saying that, oh, well, I'm a doctor. No, that has nothing to do with it. That's just a label, you know. um, to me, I'm like, yeah, we don't know how to think. And I said, okay, quick test. Um, I said, we talked about it on Monday. You and I did. And I said, what is it that when you're faced with a priority intelligence requirement, or a detective, if you're a crime analyst, a detective comes up to you and says, hey, I've been putting together these patterns that we've obviously been seeing. Here's a problem. Do you know how to put together the argument? And they were like, well, yeah, who's doing this pattern, or what is, the question of the priority, every priority intelligence requirement pretty much is a question that needs to be answered. And I was just like, no, see, you're not putting together the argument. What's the premise? And there was long pauses, and I said, okay, you and we're supposed to be the smartest people in the room. That's what decision makers think, and that's what general um, individuals, when they hear intelligence officers or intelligence analysts, they expect that we are the best of the best, the cream of the crop thinkers. They see the movies. There's tons of Hollywood movies for decades about intelligence analysts. It doesn't help that you have the Jack Ryans, which, or 24, if you remember Jack from 24. That here we can solve these problems all within a half hour or within a season. or what was it, Criminal Minds, where the young lady, the blonde, is on the headset. She's like, hold on, I'm tracking the car right now. And they solve the case in 30, 45 minutes. Um, I said, unfortunately, that's not intelligence. That's not analysis. And it sure as heck is not critical thinking. I am
It's
always,
Hollywood.
it is, but you go back to, and I love the small scene in what Clear and Present Danger with Harrison Ford when he's sitting. Is it Clear and Present Danger, or was it the first? Yeah, Clear and Present Danger. When he sits in the cubicle with the other analysts and they're just all huddled together, and it's a slow scene, it's a slow burn, and you could see the look of intensity on his face. I'm like, that's what we do. It's we have to stew about the what, the why, go back to this, let's look at that. Why are we not looking at this? And I'm going, why are you not asking questions? Why are you not looking at, and like I said, I'm like, I continue to today, like, I have so many things, these bookmarks. Those are things that I have to recall back to myself. These are not things for, oh, that's a good idea for me to write on. No, as I'm learning, I'm going, I didn't think about, not only the deductive reasoning has nothing to do with just argumentation. It's about the wording that we use. It's um and I did, when I wrote the week before and then released it last week or even earlier this week about Dower's critical thing introduction to critical thinking. I'm like, I finished the book. I mean, gosh, it's 500 and something pages. Yeah, it's, yeah, 550 pages long. And there are things in there that I have never seen in any of my other critical thinking books. There is nothing. Um,
That's a that's actually very critical that you're not seeing it in other books.
yes.
And the fact, and that's what I can't help but think that when you're at these conferences, hopefully you have a good turnout, and that the audience and individually they're paying attention. Because to me, what I see you doing is you're leaving behind these golden nuggets of gifts, of mental gifts, of clarity and purpose, and
Yeah.
uh, to me that's priceless. And that's why you didn't mention Hialeah, by the way. I
Yeah.
was hoping to see you in Orlando, but you got a tight schedule already.
Yeah.
So
I missed both proposals for ILEA and IACA.
ah,
And I would have to say those are probably two of the primary crime analyst places. Okay. Yes, they are on the planet. But that by the time that they came up, everybody else had kind of fallen into place. Um, yeah, because at the end of last year was really crazy busy with
oh yeah,
how many, um, you know. But going back to your point, like, yes, I'm not seeing some of this stuff in books, except for, yeah, this book, it was printed by published by Barnes and Noble in 1998. Now he's only published a couple of books on critical thinking and reasoning, and that's, I'm like, okay, but why are we not teaching this in the academies, in the universities? And then that's why I wrote the other article, almost like it was a three-part article in a way. Um, the tradecraft malpractice that came out last night. I finally published that, yeah, at like 9 o'clock last night. The keeping students, losing thinkers, and then the tradecraft without thinking. Um, because that was part of the other conversation is we were talking about misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda, which of course you and I were already talking about Monday. And I really looked at asking that question. I said, let's see your hands. So no cheating on the keyboard. I said, what is the definition, the intelligence definition of misinformation? Crickets. And I said, just give me buzzwords of what, and they stumbled through. We did the same thing for disinformation. Then when we got to propaganda, that was easy. Well, it's, either state or non-state actors, mostly state actors that, want to push their agenda in a way to change or, coerce another society's viewpoints, which I'm like, that's great, because we see that propaganda now every day in our news media, especially with the events going on in Minneapolis. That's been really blown open of, that these are paid agitators. These are part of the complete socialist, communist, and even they're bringing in the word Marxist, which we hadn't seen Marxist propaganda on Antifa and Trump, anti-right um, protests, if you will, riots, until this month, until January. We started to see the Marxist, which does, okay, well, yeah, precursor, but to me, Marxism was kind of that segue into the communist. But then I go, wow, this generation is just so stupid to want Marxism, socialism, communism. You look at the mayor now of New York who called Adams, his capitalist, saying that, well, you can't, something with about the $12 billion, like, you're going to go into a deficit. And, he kept putting this whole thing of, well, we're going to have free buses and free this, free childcare. And then all of a sudden the other day it was, so if we don't do something about it, we're going to be in a $12 billion deficit. You're like, yeah, because your socialist tactics don't work. But people don't think. They don't want to do history. And I'm just like, I think you said it. I feel too, I'm just barely scratching the surface. Um, and it really is kind of, I'm hoping that this year, with all the speaking engagements and going more live, like with this stuff and recording it and then getting it out there, that we at least get the Intel community, um, because talking to others still in the community, I'm like, I just kind of ask those questions of, so what critical thinking book do you have on your, oh, I have the toolkit, the Thinker's Toolkit. And I'm like, that's just those are just little snippets about stuff. What do you do to further that, to really go understand? And I say, well, yeah, I have the Analytical Edge, which the introduction class is just that. We kind of start to touch on stuff. But then that's why I think that this year's, that's going to be my focus, is I want to be that thorn and say, prove me, the table that says, prove me wrong. Um, you know, yeah, I, um,
Something you said a few minutes ago about uh, the lack of, I don't know if it was rigor or, but what really matters in training, especially with the three-letter agencies, once you have the employee, okay, now what? Or the new analyst or what have you. And it reminded me of two things. Um, one of them was, and I think I sent you the link along,
mhm.
you and Robin, the link to Mark Lowenthal's lecture back in I think it was 2012, with Johns Hopkins University, and the question that was on critical thinking, and his response, which was 5 or 6 minutes, that he was fairly convinced that it's not only is it difficult to do, but he's not convinced that everybody knows how to do it.
Mhm.
And I think for the training, and I'm casting a wide net here, generalizing. I think that's where the three-letter agencies and others in government, or even in law enforcement, are lacking. Yeah, we touch on the surface of definitions and maybe a couple of problem sets, case studies or whatever, and then
Yeah.
we move on to something else.
Yeah.
And it's where you want to go is much deeper than that. And the million dollar question is how do you get a movement going? I think what you're doing, at least since I've ran into you here in the last 3 or 4 months,
Yeah.
3 months, I think what you're doing is the upcoming tsunami that we need.
Yeah.
I
That's
think you're stirring the pot, and
and
you're
that's
you're
what I want to do. That
yeah,
kind of was
and
the
you're going to
epiphany.
generate questions and discussions, and you're going to make analysts and others who want to be analysts and or those who think they've been analysts or old guys like me that well shit I wish I knew this 20, 30 years ago. Um, we need that, and I think
Yeah.
you're in a prime position to do that.
And that's exactly what really hit me, 2 or 3 weeks ago was why am I just writing on kind of coming up with a problem, like or expressing, some of the metacognitive abilities, like, okay, this is how you can improve your intelligence. This is your own, and I'm talking IQ intelligence. Um, and then yeah, over the last 3 4 weeks of really I think having this on the twice a week in the mornings has really, and then it's opened the door. I've had a lot more people reach out to me through my social media, because of the stuff that I started to post, like I said, just a couple of weeks ago. um, and especially this last week of, well, you're calling out agencies and you're calling out universities, and I'm like, well, yeah, I've taught for 12 different universities in the last 18 years. And every one of them has always been worried about offending a student. What happened to where we as academics, as scholars, should be able to call out an individual student, and I don't, even an intelligence practitioner who is getting a degree, whether it's an undergrad or an advanced degree like a master's or even going for a doctorate, to say your essay, your research paper is crap. You pick a topic based off of the prompt. You don't know how to put together a simple problem, like really be able to articulate the problem, support it with sources. Who else is saying it's a problem? But furthermore, who else is saying that it's not a problem? Do we not do that in intelligence analysis? Like, whether, I don't care if it's crime analysis, just because there's a whole bunch of car break-ins in a neighborhood, does that mean that we have a gang problem? Oh, it's an organized criminal element. Are you sure? Maybe it's just teenagers who are, on mid break, they're bored, and one of them got brazen enough to start breaking into two or three neighbors' cars. Um, is that an organized criminal element? I know, it's, but to have these individuals who say, well, I'm a, deputy chief of police out of this town, and they're in my criminal justice class, or they're getting an intelligence degree. And again, I mean, I put myself in that when I went and got my undergrad and my grad intel, degrees from American Military University, and it's not knocking the university itself. I think it's a larger program, um, that we have, and we talked about it, last week and this week, of the curriculum is more towards, okay, well, it's all historics, but rather than giving and supporting the faculty that go, it's crap. Where's your argument? Where's your purpose? Do you even have a position? I don't see one. That you have I have master's degree students and doctoral students who don't even know how to put together a thesis statement, a clearly defined thesis statement. And in the end, they just conclude by they think wrapping up. And I'm like, well, what happens if you had to do an intelligence assessment? I mean, if we still look at what the FBI does, which is the 5 pillars, they have the five, assessment, study, bulletin, um, intel report. So when you look at those, yeah, they have different formats, but is critical thinking applied? And I got to throw out, you can't say SAT, structured analytic techniques, are not. I'm now to that point where I'm like so anti SATs because it's a check in the box. I mean, do we really ACH? How are you going to show that? You probably end up writing more for an ACH than you would the report itself. How did you come to that conclusion? Some of it is informal, but how do we get away from these scandals? Um, and I mean, both sides. I hear people, and we can get into the politics. Obama spied on Trump. Biden wasn't in charge. Trump has his retribution and he's doing it subtly, but nonetheless, he's doing it. Um, and I'm not meaning that anti-Trump and pro-Trump either. It's just I can put myself in the middle and look because I'm trying to, as I read, um, how much more does it take for even myself to go, huh? I see where anti-right, anti-Trump people are coming from, not in the emotional sense, um, but argumentation. Like, okay, but I can also see it from the conspiracy theorist of we're being played. Where does the intel, the intel analysis? Yeah,
It's almost like you've split yourself in a number of different pieces. You're
yeah,
red teaming against yourself. You're devil's advocating yourself, and you're introducing and you bring, like you said, what are the questions, and put yourself in this in these shoes,
yeah,
and try to, as best as possible, see the framing of their motivation and ideals and or goals and whatnot. Um, if you're on your own, uh,
yeah,
better yet, if you have another colleague or several more to collaborate with,
yeah,
and just to introduce any other ideas. What are you missing? I used to
yep,
tell students, if you're in a group of 10 and 9 are going north and 1 is going south, is the one that's going south, what if they're right?
yep.
What if the
I
one is right?
Yeah,
So clearly the other 9 missed something. And but back to critical thinking, and it just reminded me of, again, the reason I'm going back to school. I'm using this sort of analogy with, I took for about a year. I took Aikido lessons at a local university, and um, I had a problem of confidence and falling down the right way, and I kept
mm-hmm.
injuring my shoulder, and finally got to the point where it's like, well, this obviously isn't for me. But what I did walk away with is that it's a life learning process. Aikido, you never quite,
Mm.
people get the black belt and it's like, I'm done, and it's not really that way. It's always continuous learning, and that's kind of behind the reason I'm going back to school, is to see what I missed, what would I've done differently, and to have those kind of conversations that, and you're way ahead of me on this, that you're having with people to rethink, the revenue with schools that are granting these Intel
Yeah,
degrees, as opposed to, yeah, but what does the degree, what does the curriculum really mean? And are you deep diving or just barely scratching the surface?
yeah,
And and then you get the, well, they've got the degrees, but then when it comes time to put rubber on the road or whatever, and they're not getting the traction that they want with either assessments, or the scenarios are too complicated,
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, yeah, no, I'm definitely I'm as long as you continue to throw those Substacks out there, and uh, I just I became really reading your last one. I was like, holy crap! I used an expletive, but and it's like, how do we where do we start? I mean,
Yeah.
how definitely food for thought, and in so many different ways. And these are the conversations and or the readings that we need to see. Just this morning, all right, I took that last Substack. Another person, I'm assuming it's a guy, I don't really know, in Reddit said they've been a data analyst for a long time and they want to switch gears. They're thinking about and they got the money to spend on a master's in Intel,
Yeah.
similar to this other one earlier in the week. And I simply wrote, an Intel degree does not necessarily make an analyst. And oh, by the way, you might be interested in reading Charles, Dr. Russo's Substack article on the one that you just, and I put the link in there, and I'll let it speak to itself, and it
Yeah.
will. But then I think it's going to create more stress or consternation or well, if I don't pursue the master's degree, what should I be doing? And but if they really read into what you've written, it's more
Mhm.
than just a degree.
Yeah.
Philosophy, as you mentioned, the critical thinking, logical argumentation, so many other things that you can be looking into, and and uh, and I don't know if they're ever going to find the solutions to this. And they're on a quest to find a job.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think
timeline,
even, I look back at going through the interview process with the agencies, and I know that, like, say with the Bureau, when I went through the interview process, it was a panel of, a couple of SIAs, senior Intel analysts who were, it was remote, so it was over the phone. They shot me questions. Um, and I kind of almost look at it as, the questions that they usually ask um, were almost popularity questions. Like, what do you think if you have to face, tell us a time that you faced a difficult conflict with a coworker? And you're like, what the heck does that have to do with anything intelligence? I could be a complete jerk and be one of the best and brightest. And but because maybe I said what you want to hear, but then I get into that office, does then you got 100% of a great analyst, or I said exactly what you want, but I'm a horrible analyst. And I could say, when I went into the Bureau, after already being an Intel analyst with um, military, private sector, public sector, and everything, contractor, civilian, I still wasn't a good analyst. I mean, I remember the first time that I was told, go write this, go write by my SIA. I was new to a squad and they needed me to write something. And it was horrible because, one, I didn't know what it is that they really wanted. I didn't know to ask all these questions. It was, here's your prompt. And I felt like I was back in school, and I wrote what I felt like I was back in school and not an intelligence product. And when I handed it in, they called me into their office and just jaw dropped. What the heck did you just turn in? And I'm going, yeah, I've been in for 20, almost 20 years. That was 2010. I'd been in since 1990. And they were like, no, what the, and I mean, petrified. And then, of course, my heart sank, like, what the heck was I thinking? Um, and yeah, that was mostly on me. But then, that was part of the reason I ended up going back to getting my master's was, how do I do this? But then, yeah, at the end of my master's, I think I got a good education, but going into the academies, going into the higher ed, it's not, except for just a couple of classes, like through the intelligence community advanced analyst program, the ICAP. Yeah, there are classes you can take on better critical thinking, and they'll go over Mind Valley, but they don't. I just think that we never go far enough. That if you're going to have an academy that's going to be an intelligence analyst, and the analyst can go through, and now the FBI, so I'm coming full circle with that. The FBI, like 10 years ago, changed its way that it interviews agent and analysts. And so they're done in the phases. And they have a writing assessment. They ask you about your problem solving skills. But after reading from books written in the 1940s and the 50s by what you would say are agents, former agents of the FBI, about how they used to do their hiring, there was reasons, and you and I talked about this on Monday, that they looked at Harvard, they looked at Yale, they looked at Princeton, first and foremost, to recruit. They wanted those real thinkers, the ones that seem to like buck the system of professors by asking what we would say are abstract questions. That, oh, that this just isn't a student want to make a name for themselves. That's the way they're thinking. That do we ask those questions? I mean, I know the washout rates are high, mostly in the agent classes, the analyst classes. When I was a counselor in 2015 at the FBI Academy, our washout rate was only like 10% or less. You had 40 Intel analysts, and you would lose somewhere around two. um, and that's because, of course, taking the tests. If you failed two tests on two different modules, the third failure, you were just automatically out. If you failed a test, took the retest, and failed, you didn't get a third chance. So your two failures, that was out. But they never really taught, except for a couple of classes. Dr. Jan Goldman was part of not only the academy, but the ICAP program for the community, and taught his ethics of spying, which to me was a more critical thinking class, because you had to think about, the philosophy. And that's
I think
what,
that's
like,
the title, I think that's the title of his book, isn't it?
yep, yeah,
Yeah.
the ethics of spying, and the companion book. And I really wish that he would update it, because we've changed so much. I think our society, so our philosophy, unfortunately, has changed. But I just think that being the hard hitting, you don't know anything. You have to start from the bottom as an Intel analyst, that unless you're going to hire the best and the brightest, and believe me, I wouldn't make the cut, or I wouldn't have made the cut of my own thoughts, with that I put in there about recommendations and implications, of saying that unless you ask these critical thinking questions, unless you have already a degree in critical thinking, like, why don't we have a degree in critical thinking? It's like we have degrees, PhDs in philosophy, but why do we not have? I mean, you have the Foundation for Critical Thinking, and they have their education standpoint. It's expensive, so I can't afford it on my own unless a company or an agency were to pick it up. But the information is just, it's, well, to me, it's not information.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and here, like I said, I found their original book, um, Paul and Elder's original book, at a half price books. And the other thing that I meant to mention the other week is, I could tell this book really had never been opened, because you could still hear the cracks when you open the spine. And it's the pages are pristine. There's no dog-eared. Not until I got a hold of it, that I've been messing with pages, it and I had bought their Roman and Little complete set of critical thinking books, and I've used all those as references, as mini manuals. And again, I think that I'm just constantly reminded of what I don't know. And that was part of the reason of starting the Analytic Edge Academy. I don't think it'll ever blow up, but it's the next class that I just released last week was about how to become an intellectual, and I did have a question from somebody who was interested in joining the Edge Academy and was but wanted to know about the courses and the forthcoming courses, and I was like, they said they actually asked, well, what does intellectual have anything to do with critical thinking? And I had just completely outlined a whole chapter out of the Elder and Paul and Elder's book that they go into deep, talking even more than I do in the intellectual class about clarity and fairness and objectivity. Well, doesn't that have everything to do with critical thinking? That an intellectual isn't somebody who just sits in a suit jacket with a cigar and a scotch and wants to talk over people. To me,
Speaking of dog ears in the books, I've already got dog ears in your books, by the way. Um, Before I forget, the old book that you got from Barnes and Noble, the black one, is that Elders?
no, this is Francis Wantabi Dower, Dauer, and this
Um,
is that his
Hard to
book,
find, probably.
huh?
Probably hard to find.
No, Barnes and Noble.
Oh,
They'll probably have it on print on demand, because it's their book. They
okay,
probably
got
have
it.
it yeah, probably a soft cover, not a hard cover, but you never know. Um, but yeah, that's the reason I love going book hunting. I go to antique shops or uh, other kind of like used bookstores. Um, but in his books, and this is where I'm just floored that again, reading, picking up a book that says Introduction to Critical Thinking is different than any other. If I were to pick up their book, Elder and Paul, and then I got tons of other critical thinking books. I even have, my book, and even my book, I would say, is amateurish. Not degrading it, but it's a foundational book.
And I think in order to win, I use that term loosely, but in order to win over or convince current and future
Mm,
wannabe analysts, and I mean that in a nice way, um,
yeah.
if they're afraid to get in over their heads with the complexity of reading material, perhaps starting in its most simplest forms. I'm picking that up in your books. Your books are very insightful, and I haven't even read the whole book yet. But the portions that I've already been highlighting and dog earing, and I've already made asterisks with my pen and stars, and going to use those as part of the assignment I'm turning in on Saturday. These things are within reach, I think, of
Hmm.
a current and future audience in the places that you're going to go lecture. Oh, by the way, before I forget, I just joined another group. Um, um, so DIA has an alumni association, and it's primarily for those who served at DIA for the most part, retirees and or even perhaps even some or former whatever. And the only reason I tried to join, and sure enough, they accepted me, is because I went to their collection management course. I think it was like, I forgot, 4 or 6 weeks long. And but then they took into account my other things that I brought in for applying to join, and they let me join. And a little over a week ago, they had Mark Lowenthal talk about his latest book, and they also have free subscription to their newsletter and bringing updates. And but anyway, I if it's okay with you, I want
Yeah.
to see if I can convince them to bring you on board as a guest speaker,
Oh,
because
that would be awesome.
what you have and we've been tossing around here for the last few months and lately is something that, especially for those that are former officers and or even analysts, um, I have a feeling, and they know about ICAP. I have a feeling um, they're going to say, "Wait a minute, who's this guy? Holy cow! It makes sense." Or I knew it. I brought this up years ago, and that's what I sense. So
Yeah.
I'll throw your name to I can't remember her last name, Deborah. I knew her mom. I never met her mom, but she was. They were both affiliated with National Military Intelligence Association (NMIA),
Yeah.
and at the time, we're going back to when Lieutenant General Williams. He's already passed away, but he was like the front poster child, if you want to call it that, 3-star general for NMIA. Um, we're talking about mid to late 90s, early 2000s. And but I'll reach out to her, and if anything, I'll provide some links so that she can kind of take a look and then
Yeah.
kick it around and see if you'd be willing to speak.
Yeah. And you can always let her know I too, former, I was military attached to DIA,
Yep.
both as a reservist, as an activated. I was a contractor as well on, several contracts throughout DIA. And then, of course, yeah, went to from the 1990s. I mean, I I just started going, well, we all have it, right? We have our I Love Me book. So it's all the all the certificates, and I've always kept all of them to include those that we did on, oh gosh, way back then at DIA. You could go on to through JWIX or even through Cypernet, and you could do their mini classes online. They were like one of the first that you could do these online classes, um, and going through a lot of them, because I have been convinced by several other people to go for my certified law enforcement analyst exam. But you can't just turn in a CV. You have to turn in certificates that show that you, or curriculum that you taught, or that you were already, like, where when you became an analyst and for how long, and government service or whatever. And I mean, I'm like going through paper after paper, and I did find 1993, 1994 certificates from DIA, from when back then it was the Defense Intelligence College, or JMITSI, sorry, the Joint Military Intelligence Training Center, which takes it all the way back to the 90s. But, um, and seeing the evolution. So, yeah. And going through those, I would say out of 100 certificates, maybe one had anything to do with analysis. Like, it was a lot. I could go back and go, well, that was more talking about history, talking about the fall of the Berlin Wall and the intelligence failure. And you're just like, but that didn't really get into the analysis, even post 9/11, that the took a class on post 9/11, even post Boston bombing. I remember going through even in 2018, 19, one of the agents from the Boston bombing, when I was the school safety officer for Department of Education of Nevada, they came out and did a post investigation from his point of view as being a special agent on that task force, the Boston bombing. And we got a certificate for that. But at no time was there anything about the intelligence analysis. It was like it was just good old detective work. And coming from having been in the bureau during that time, like, no, it was all about intelligence. It had to be because they didn't know everything. So, yeah.
Did you see Patriots Day?
Yeah, Patriots Day. Yeah.
It's a bit of Hollywood in there. I wanted to ask you, since we were talking about certifications and credentials and certificates, you have IFPC designation. So 2018, I
Mm,
looked it up, and because it was new, and I enrolled. I took the proctored exam.
mhm.
Uh, Pearson, I think. Right? Anyway.
Yep.
Um, I didn't even, to be honest, I didn't really study for it. I mean, I saw the reference materials. I think I looked at a couple of things here and there, but for the most part, I just relied on what I already knew. I passed it. I
Yep.
could have probably done better, but I passed it. So I had it for 3 years, renewed it again, passed it again. And then they came out about a year or so ago saying
Yep.
that I was no longer. How are you able to keep yours active?
I was so end of 2024 is when they came out saying no longer will we allow academics to take it on this date. I was mine were was had expired in August of 2024, and I renewed it, and like 2 months later that directive came out saying that they were no longer going. So mine's going to expire here very, very soon.
Oh, okay.
I literally came right under that last wire, um, to have the designation from the program, the PMO. I hope that at some point funding does come back in to allow academics. Um, I just don't see. This is where I would say is almost, I feel like it's a money waster for the Department of Defense to have said that GS-12s, 13s need this designation, but we go through LinkedIn and we see all these people who are intelligence officers, intelligence analysts within the military, civilian as well as active reserve, and I barely see anybody with the IFPC,
Yep.
and they were supposed to be using that designation as a way to, yeah, gauge. And you and I the since it came into inception in 2018, 2019, and I took the first one. I did the same thing. I drove up to Reno and went to Pearson VUE and took it. I didn't study, and I still, my raw score was passing. It wasn't stellar, but who cares? They don't post your, like, oh, your raw score was 732 and you needed 720 to pass. You got your designation. Um, yeah, even though they had the candidate handbook, um, and all the, because I'm like, well, collection management, that was a big part of it, and what's this, who's in charge of that? To me, that was, I could do without it. It doesn't. I'm not trying to degrade or offend anybody who has a designation.
Right.
It just, to me, was okay. Here's another challenge as an intelligence, we are intelligence analysts forever, and but I'm true to that as well, of, well, if there's a designation, why not try for it? If I don't get it, I don't get it. I know I've been doing this for 30 years. I know I teach it. So I didn't pass it, and then, yeah, that was, somebody had asked, last year I had taken the test for the leaf, and through IACA, and they're like, "Why did you just do that?" And I'm like, "Well, one, it was, you filled out the application, you sent in some documentation, and then they said, great, you can do this, and you check in the box, you can take the online proctored exam." I took the proctored exam online, and I passed. Well, actually, I failed the first time. I failed the first time. I will say that, because I think I put way too much information. I was too analytic. about the essay questions that they had.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, even though I have the books, I bought the books years ago. The study material for the, the law enforcement certification, not just Leaf, but I was just like, Marilyn Peterson's book, and then the newest one that came out. I'm looking at my bookshelf, going, "Yep, there they are." Um, I didn't pass, and when I asked, they said, "Well, they don't go back through. You can retake it." And I said, "Okay, I'll retake it." And this time, I came with a different perspective, not new information. Um, but I just was like, okay, I'm not going to make it as long as a diatribe. Part of my feeling was, did I talk over the person who was looking at it? That could be my ego, right? That, well, they don't know. I know what I wrote was really probably overkill for the answer, but it was still. But then I got to think, as a professor, if I had a student who overthought the question, I would have to fail them too. So I'm like, okay. So the second time around, yeah. And then, yeah, and talking to others within IACA, because I volunteer for their curriculum. I'm on another um, volunteer group for leadership. And so I get to take classes and I get to do things within the organization. And I love it because I take some of the webinars and I do the online training, and I love it because it keeps me engaged. And they were like, why don't you go for that? And I'm like, okay, I will. And yeah, I tried to put in for it, and now I've got to get all this documentation. I'm like, man, it's the documentation that's tedious.
Where did I
uh,
put it?
yeah. And that's, yeah, I have a whole drawer full of the I Love Me stuff. And I'm like, a lot of stuff I wish I would have kept. But again, it goes back to the whole thing of, I will always be humbled by what I definitely learn day after day of what I don't know. Um, either through and I would love for IFPC to come back to academics. I wish there was maybe even a pay, for it in a way. Um, that
Here's
if
a
you,
here's another title that I think is coming your way, whether you like it or not. And before I tell you what it is, I liken it to I think Omar Bradley, General Bradley, was described as the soldier's soldier.
Mhm.
I think you're going to be described eventually, sooner if not later, or later if not sooner, the analyst.
Yeah, but that's already Locke Johnson, and that's already Lowenthal and Clark.
Lowenthal, and yeah, add your name to the group there. So
I
um,
thank you.
yeah, no, but I can't go to IAFE because I'm going to be on a family vacation, and the one in London with Europe. That sounds very tempting, but I'll have to take a look at timing and everything. And
Yeah. No, I
eventually,
mean, I'm always.
these other ones, uh, Intelligence Studies Association and the critical thinking folks. Um, if I get around to doing that, but I look forward to lessons learned and what you're going to be taking away from those
Yeah,
events.
if there's ever a time that you or anybody else ever wants to co-author a paper, go into a research or do a presentation, or want to do a co, you know, proposal, I'm always up for those. I find fun in those because, again, I look at it as everything. If I have to put together a presentation, it's about learning, and how the best way to present it to a group, depending on who my audience is. Um, I know for Columbia Southern University, we have a innovations and technology conference coming up in April online. It's virtual. Um, and I put in, my topic is about the use of AI and critical thinking. And it's not knocking. I am a very big proponent of AI. Yes, I could knock AI all the way to Sunday, but I think AI, as a researcher, as a writer, as a critical thinker, I've started to use it to help me flood myself with. I have it come up with daily critical thinking quotes. I have it come up with new, uh, I say, topics for my learning, and then I'll translate that into, oh my gosh, what I didn't know about Bayesian reasoning. And there's reasons that I have like 4 and 5 articles on that, or there's reason that I talk about intellectualism, because we've lost that. With intellectualism, we lose civility, we lose that ability to even have disagreements or agreements. And further, here we are, we're talking about things for over an hour. You have people who can't hold a 5-minute conversation, and they're smart. They'll say they're super smart, and you're just like, let's talk, and yet nobody can.
Is your favorite go-to is it Claude or is it a mix?
It's so I do what's called vibing. Vibing is taking, my go-to is Chat GPT,
Oh,
because
okay.
I've literally trained it. I don't even have to. I can create a new GPT box and say, my schedule today is I need to write a new chapter on my theoretical. I'm working on another book about a new theory that I came up with on. Um, well, I can tell you really quick to get to that answer. Um, so my theory is precision and curiosity theory. That while we can be curious about topics and information, when we say we're curious about it, we're not looking at any kind of precision in our thinking. Kind of goes back to precision in our thinking within critical thinking, or within critical thought. That when we're curious, we only look at the surface. We don't even try to scratch the surface. We're just curious about it, and then we run with it. That's what we see full of social media these days, is just that. And I liken that to what we see in the Intel community. We see a topic that's really hot, and then we scratch the surface, and then it's gone. That priority or intelligence requirement gets updated by, oh, we think we have enough on that, where we don't. So what I do is I finally, I use Chat GPT as that. I've got it trained so I can open a dialogue box and I can just speak to it. I love the dictation part, because I don't want to type everything out. So I use the dictation, and I talk to it. That's my AI kind of companion in a way, that I will have conversations. I need you to go research this topic, that topic. Um, but then I'll do the vibing. I'll go through my Copilot, my Gemini, my Claude, and pretty much ask that. Well, I say pretty much. No, I cut and paste the prompt that I put together to see what it comes up with. And it's something that the sycophancy and the hallucinations, that, and so now I'm seeing that as I use the other APIs, that they are very, very closely aligned, with the exception of some wordings. They're not in direct conflict with one another in their answers. So at least I can stack them, and I can say this came from Claude, this came from Gemini, this came from ChatGPT, as probably. And I do every once in a while use Grok. I will not use DeepSeek. That is highly CCP biased, and so to me, it's like it's not worth even using. Um, it's Eastern thought as well. Unfortunately, you think that, well, do I just want Western thought? In a way, but the Eastern, which is Chinese, because it's a Chinese company, and the way that they are using it as their AI for their country is that it's highly censored and it's highly biased. So if you were to ask theoretical questions on philosophy, it's going to come back with a lot more Confucius and Taoism, which is fine if you want to bring those in. But
Exactly. That's fascinating to hear. Wow, you're all over on that. By any chance, I know we're past our time thing, but real quick, have you picked up in your recent experience the past year? Have you picked up on any sort of deliverables that came out of these LLMs that were like, wait a minute, you had to pause. In other words, you sensed some sort of bias or alignment with you or anything like that at all?
yes, because I also ask that contrarian viewpoint in my prompts. I want to try to get, but yes, you can. I don't see it as much with ChatGPT anymore. I see it with Copilot, um, a little bit with Gemini. So Gemini is, of course, Google. Copilot is Microsoft. Um, and those are what Anthropic, I think, backbones. Claude is, I think, an open AI. You do see the omission of information, especially when I start to talk politics and intelligence. Um, you see a lot more on the current administration when I start digging into intelligence and analysis and what's been put out. And I think part of that is also the what ingested, which is mainstream media, which is very left leaning still. That you don't see what the Obama administration did and what the Biden administration, their agencies did or did not do as compared to Trump 1 and 2 administrations. Um, and then I start to see a lot of wash before pre-Obama first administration, going back into the Bush, the Clinton, the Bush 41, 43, and then into the Reagan era. Yeah, policy is the only thing that these things will pull up, but you see more news being pulled up in say the ingestion of the last 10 years, and they kind of negate the previous administration. There's that, and that's to me is inherent bias within the GPTs, within the APIs. Chat GPT is less to me likely to have omissions or try to come up with sycophancy of trying to come up with its version of events, whereas I think Copilot definitely comes up with its version, being a Microsoft, and that I think that there are inherent biases put in deliberate. That's my humble opinion,
That
but that's part of the vibing.
yeah, no, what you just described is pretty much at the heart of my concern on the part of, even though I'm not in the business anymore, of analysts venturing forth into this AI world, especially with large language models, and um, either taking for face value or not questioning or not even picking up on the little nuances you just described, which I think are critical. That I think people need to hear this. This is probably another Substack, but
Yeah,
it's a shot across the bow or whatever you want to describe it. That heads up. You need to keep this in mind as you move into all these. And you mentioned OpenAI. I saw a banner that was running in the news. I think it was yesterday. Amazon just laid off a whole ton of workers,
mm-hmm.
and they turned around and poured a bunch of money into OpenAI,
Yeah,
uh, like 30, 40, 50 million or whatever it was. Um, that's scary.
it
Um,
is.
but I digress.
Yeah, it is because I have a business account with Amazon. I had a personal account. I have a personal account too, but I switched over to a business account, and I had a problem with my books being shipped. I think I've told you both of my books are going to be in the International Spy Museum in their bookstore and on their
Oh,
online bookstore.
sweet.
Yeah, when I went to the I3 summit back in November in DC, a nice young lady, one of their agents in the Spy Museum, uh, in the actual museum, my colleague and I were taking pictures around the intelligence community seal, and I was pointing. I had my fingers up like this, and I'm kind of doing the whole looking at the camera and pointing to the two. It was agency and the bureau, and she's like, "Are you making the peace sign?" And she was just kind of kidding with me, and I said, no, no, no. I said, I was actually, these are two of the agencies I worked with or for over my career. And she's like, oh, those two. And my friend, my colleague goes, oh, no, 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 go around that wheel and tell her which ones that you've worked with for directly, not like you were in a talk with this agency. No, that you literally, your signature line was. And so I was going around, and she's just like, oh my gosh. So, anyways, later on, she found us in the exhibits, and she had, and my friend had said, well, he wrote books on intelligence, he teaches intelligence. And she later came back and asked, would I give her my contact info for the book people, because and the names of the books. And then I did. She came back and said, I put these on the desk. The purchaser, just before Christmas, got a hold of me, and I ordered books. Now, here's to finish the Amazon part of the story: is they needed the books before the end of January, and here we are. We're on the 30th. We got one more day. Um, the bulk of my order through, because they can't order directly from Amazon. They had to purchase through me or the publisher. I'm technically the publisher, so I ordered the books. Well, part of the shipment didn't show up. And I reached out to Amazon online, and it's a chat bot. No real customer service.
Long gone.
Yeah. I finally I did it for hours. I mean, I did, because I'm like, these books still hadn't shipped. They had been over a month that they had been saying we're going to be shipped. Um, and I need these like ASAP. And I didn't want to just cancel the order. I wanted to find out, like, have they, where, get a hold of the printer. You know who your printer is for my order. Like, find out, did they even print those off and ship them? For some reason, the 20 something books I ordered for the precision, um, only 16 made it out of the printer. 12 just remained in the queue. Why they weren't all bundled together and shipped as one, I don't know. And that's what I was trying to find out. But I ended up having to go through click after click after click, finally to get to a what they would say is a live. And it was not even about purchases. Um, it was something completely different, that I was like, I just need to get a hold of a live person. And I did outsource to India, which to me is like, okay, language barrier did have a problem. And they, oh no, we promise it's going to be delivered in 24 hours. The next day, still nothing. I reached back out. Luckily, I kind of knew my path. I reached back out, and they said, oh no, it'll be delivered in the next 24 hours. I said, but that's what you said 24 hours ago. Has it even been printed? Well, we don't know. The system is telling us it hasn't, but that it'll print and ship in the next 24 hours. 24 hours goes by. I just canceled the order and redid it. But then it says it's going to be, they're not going to be shipped until the 6th of February. And that was Monday, Tuesday of this week that I went through all this. And I'm like, for the most part, all you get is a chatbot. And it can't really do that much. But I know here in our area in North Texas, we have Amazon has a huge campus, and they just built a whole um, Not, it's not a warehouse, it's a data warehouse, which is, they said for every 1,000 square feet, it's 100 people they have to hire. And that was coming from Amazon. But then when you look at the local, I tried to do it, Amazon jobs, there's nothing out here. And I'm like, no, that's all, it's going to be all AI. It's probably a data center or an AI data center because, yes, I had heard the same thing that they had entered and they're going to continue to do that because they're also Amazon is also developing their own robots
We
for
have a
warehouse.
data center that's just 30 minutes away, a proposal to build a data center in New Mexico near the Santa Teresa, very southern end of Donana County in New Mexico, in the middle of nowhere in a desert. And there's a public uncertainty
Mm,
being voiced about where's the water coming from for the cooling
for the
centers.
cooling. Yep.
And uh, the farmers in southern New Mexico. So, and I know this because my daughter lives near one of the farms, and I go see her every now and then. The farmers along the southern part of New Mexico rely on water that's released from the Colorado, but only at certain times of the year. And so
Mm,
we've got the pecan orchards, the cotton fields, the chili fields, and there's only so much water that's given out. Um, and to my knowledge, I've not heard about any underground aquifers
yep.
like there is in El Paso. So my question is, where's the water coming from? But these AI centers, it breaks. I mean, I've been frustrated talking with people from India, uh, and I'm thinking, okay, what ATMs did to bank tellers, now we're seeing the same thing happening with, outsourcing,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get Americans in their right minds are going to work for and take so much heat for not
Yeah.
enough pay. So send it to Vietnam or somewhere, and
But
you
then they'll
can't
just give it
understand
to
these people.
AIs.
And then chatbots.
Yeah.
It's going to become more frequent. So be careful. It kind of reminds me of H.G. Wells' Things to Come. It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I mean, we're into solar land, and a lot of our solar land in Southern California that we own, um, it's all solar farms. So it's in the Antelope Valley, Lancaster, Palmdale. That whole valley is going to be nothing but battery storage and solar. The solar originally was for a lot more power, because California has mandated in its laws about electric cars, electric buses, so on, and even whole cities like I believe Lancaster is a green city. All of its city buildings, municipality buildings, are run off of solar power. Um, and more of the projects that we're hearing are for the solar, are not for solar power necessarily, but for AI projects, which yes goes to power, but it's not for power production for electric cars, power production for housing. It's for the data centers. And they said they're just going to need so much more. Texas is the second largest solar producer, or will be. So if you're into, dirt is gold, you'd be looking, I would say, look now into California, and I think Arizona has some, um, but that's where you'll make the millions. You can buy land for, 5 acres for 120,000, but in 5 to 7 years, when these solar projects kick off, you'll be able to command 300, 400,000 per acre. And then you can choose whether to sell it outright or leasing it for 20, $40,000 a month for the next 40 or 50 years. So, yeah, I mean,
step
but that's
aside
just
oil. Step aside
exactly,
oil.
it is.
Wow.
So, we're going to have to contend with that, as AI grows.
Yeah.
So, and again, I mean, I digress. Going back to that AI, the whole thought was that AI to me is making me smarter. I'm using it what I think is in a way that it's not to undermine academia, it's not to undermine the scholarly thought. Um, I mean, it will help me. It does help me in my research. It helps me put together long articles, short articles. I have stacks of projects of where I want to go with things. I just don't haphazardly say, write me an article on tradecraft malpractice. I put thought into it. Going back to Dower's book, I almost look at this as my Bible now. The reason why is you look at, if you can get a copy of his book, everything that he talks about with critical thinking, um, non-demonstrative arguments and demonstrative arguments. He talks about, the deductive, the language levels have meaning. Everything doesn't matter what page you pull up. He does it into a mathematical equation. I hate mathematics, but guess what? I have actually used those equations. I've plugged them into the AI to help me understand what I still think is he's way up here. It's made sense. So why aren't we teaching that to intelligence analysts so they can sit down and say, here's my problem, here's the premise, and write it almost like a mathematical equation to say then the line which we would say is division is called the therefore, and then your conclusion should be under that. But as long as this is true, these one of these are true, therefore this has to be true. We're not teaching that. I, I literally just in 5 seconds explained an argument in a mathematical equation that 2 months ago I would say I never thought of. And it would have made a lot of my argumentation as an intelligence analyst, as a conversationalist, so much easier.
The work that you're uncovering, that you're doing now, that you're playing with, and it's shaping up to become something bigger than what we've anticipated. I mean, that's gonna be lessons learned, and that's gonna be a gift to. And I keep thinking of just analysts, but it's not just analysts, but
It's not.
anyone that's going to be interacting with, and they will be
Yeah.
sooner than later with AI. It's just going to make you've done the homework, and
Yeah.
almost a here's how, but you have to bring something else along into this whole equation, and that's
Mhm.
the things that you've been arguing about earlier. Um, Aside from understanding the algorithms and proper ways of prompt engineering and all this, what else is the analyst bringing to the table? Is there
Yeah.
training enough? Probably not.
Yeah.
Um, there's a
Exactly.
lot to unpack and there's a lot to learn. And
Yeah.
hopefully, analysts don't get tired of learning.
That's the complacency I think that we do, that we get into our job and it's the daily grind. And there is no time that whether you're in a field office, you're at a headquarters, that someone says, you know what, we need you to sit down for an hour and you need to do this and pass this with 100%, and there is no ability to cheat.
Yeah.
You either know how to really think and can really pick this apart, or you don't. And until you pass that, there is no promotion, there's no merit pay, there's no, I mean, you got to tie it to some incentive, right? That someone has to say until they can. I didn't do it for 20 something years. Not until did I really start diving in myself that I'm like, I really want to know how I could have gotten by all this, and then how my analysis suffered. I get where, and then to be even, and probably a topic for another day, but to be criticized or assessed by a senior analyst on your performance. When the FBI went to a new performance in 2016 or 2015, um, it was all based on what you've written, that you had to have written assessments and blah blah blah. Um, and well, who's critiquing those? Because you and I have probably met senior Intel analysts that I'd be like, they only did it because of a popularity contest, and SSA really liked them and moved them up, or another SIA really liked them and moved on, and said, hey, here's my good buddy, hire them. um, because then I saw a lot of capable analysts who could have taught me something got sidelined because, well, they were really good analysts in their job, but they just kept them there because, well, they didn't want to lose that analytical value, which I think they could have done better analytical value or more significant had they been put in a leadership position to push that, hey, go do this. And that's what I feel personally now. Um, yeah, I kind of really hope that the more I email, and I really do appreciate your support and others, that I even said the same thing to Robin. If I could get my foot in the door at ODNI, CIA, FBI, and be able to look at their training and critique it, not as the expert, but as someone I feel like I'm getting more enlightened to that if I'm wrong on saying that these agencies are not teaching analysts, even in follow on, in service trainings, that, well, then you get what you pay for. You're throwing money out the door because we all aren't smart enough. But is there a way that we can continue to be smart, advocate for AI to help to make us smarter, to do a better job doing analysis, especially this day and age with the ingestment of thousands of bits of information per second, that we can't conceivably read the message traffic as though it was in the 1950s or 60s, when it was a report or two per day given to an agent or an analyst, at the OSS or at the fledgling agency. That's why we've seen headquarters blow up over the last 20, 30 years. We don't have the field. We expect everything is done by technology. We've cut human. That's that human interaction, only unless we need interrogators, are collecting real human. And then the other human that we're collecting, is it trash? Are we, so yeah, I know, digress onto something else. I know we've talked for an hour and a half.
I'm going to go ahead and I recently uh, I went back through a ton of emails, and I found the contact at ODNI who years ago sent me a bunch of the Tradecraft Standards cards. Um,
Oh,
and I handed most of them out at like ILEA conference and whatnot. And I wanted to get some more for the upcoming class that I'm doing in uh,
yeah.
Village, whatever it's called, north of Houston. Anyway, I finally heard back, but they delegated it to someone else. So, and they haven't gotten back to me yet on if they were going to send me the digital version so that I could print it myself. In other words, at cost. I believe the one moved up in rank. She might be a 15 anyway, and I think they're affiliated with the analytic integrity office component of ODNI. I'm going to go ahead and introduce you in a separate email to both of them, just to name drop you, and then maybe even put the bio underneath that,
Yeah.
because you mentioned hoping to get through the door, and this might be one way. So
Yeah. And I mean, I would love to be able to do research, like literally, um, ground truth. Out of all the research I've ever done, and I've even had AI help me. I don't see any external. I would love to be able to give very significant, hard analytic cognitive tests to intelligence analysts of all grades. I wouldn't be surprised. So here's my kind of my null hypothesis. My hypothesis is that analysts are not smart. Okay. We're not dumb, but we're not smart as we think we are. I think that people get to know their area of expertise and they become absolutely brilliant in knowing every fact and figure, say on China or the Indo-China foreign policy and conflicts. Yeah, because they studied it and they lived it. They know every little crack and crevice. But when it comes to analysis, then they're blind because the confirmation bias comes in. They get, as we know, we come in an expert in something and then someone attacks us and we get defensive. Well, that's because now we're not open to, hey, you're right. Maybe I'm not thinking about this in the right way. Could I do, or could I put together a team that we would literally, if you want a real hard hitting assessment of, yes, the things that intelligence analysts are supposed to know, like you said, with the analytic cards, how many really would know what ICD 203 says beyond what the little card says? What about ICD 206? Like, shouldn't we know chapter and verse like a lawyer or a judge would on where that law is coming from? But then also, yeah, for how did you come up with that argument? Did you put that argument into a mathematical equation to ensure that we know if your premise is true, then therefore the conclusion is true? There's falsities, there's P's and Q's, what Dower goes into, and I think that's something, that's just the argument. And there's a whole bunch of other, like I said, his book, I've now had to read it twice and I'm still of what I wish. And yet I hear these analysts on LinkedIn and you know again, because this is recorded, I'm not saying names or even monikers, but I have to kind of question, like, what you think that you're an analyst, but you're regurgitating stuff. You're not actually putting anything new thought or perspective. Whereas, yes, I can say I can regurgitate stuff, but I'm asking the questions. I'm coming up with recommendations, wanting to further the academic, scholarly, and practitioner or pragmatic um, discussion. And no one wants to seem to have it except you and Robin. You
Well,
guys show up.
I
And
suspect there's some more to be found. It's just a matter of um, it's just a matter of uh, extending our networking
yeah,
opportunities via social media, via email groups, via associations, via the ICA, for example, ICA and ILEA bulletin boards, and and whatever other means, Reddit and so forth, um, to keep pursuing those and releasing new articles and having discussions and the Zoom features, and then of course Analytic Edge. So there's work that remains to be
yeah,
done, and hopefully we can convince more to come on
yeah.
board. And
That's what I'm hoping.
I think this coming year, with the conferences that you're scheduled to go attend, you're going to garner some more interest and coming
That's what I'm
into
hoping.
yeah, they're going to come into your domain. And um, this by no means is going to happen overnight, but I'm glad that it's
Yeah.
happening.
Yep. Well, thank you very much. I know I've got to get going.
Yes, sir.
We've
Me too.
gone well over the hour.
It was fun. I get to become more comfortable and take my seatbelt off now.
Yeah. And so am I. I mean, I'm starting to do that. So you have a great weekend. You take care.
Yes, sir. You as well. Take care.
Bye.